The heat shimmered off the asphalt like a mirage, warping the jagged tree lines into something half real, half memory. The overlook at Donner's Point was meant to be scenic, a place where families stretched their legs, snapped pictures, tossed snacks to squirrels. Not where things ended. Detective Lena Maris stood at the edge of the lot, arms folded, squinting past the police tape at the 1992 Dodge Caravan. It was off-white, sun-bleached paint, peeling in strips like dead skin. The back hatch was closed. The side door hung open like a jaw unhinged mid-scream. She had only been transferred to Placer County 5 weeks ago. This was supposed to be a quieter post. Routine thefts, drunk drivers, noise complaints. But nothing about the van looked routine. The radio crackled behind her. Maris, CSU's almost done in there. You're clear to take a look. She didn't answer. Her boots crunched over gravel as she approached the van. Inside, the interior was strangely, untouched. Maps crumpled on the dashboard. A box of melted granola bars. Children's books. An empty sippy cup. Everything present except the people who should have been here. 4 people. Richard Dalton, 38. Sarah Dalton, 34. Emily, 13. Ben, 6. Lena rested her hand on the warm metal of the driver's side door. The keys still dangled in the ignition. One window was halfway down. No signs of a break-in, no fingerprints that didn't match the Daltons. It was as if they had simply stopped existing. The SUV that had reported the van was long gone now. Some tourists had pulled in for a selfie and called it in when no one was around. That was 36 hours ago. Local search had already combed the nearby woods. Nothing, not a footprint, not a scream, not a single broken branch. She crouched near the edge of the parking lot. That's when she saw it, half buried in the dust. Near the wild thistle brushing the cliff's edge, a child's blue flip-flop, cartoon shark print. Left foot, a size too small for anyone but Ben. Lena didn't touch it, she just stared. The last family photo, taken just 4 days earlier, at a gas station outside Reno, showed Ben wearing those flip-flops. He had a juice box in one hand, was making a face. At his sister, Emily, they looked normal. Not exactly happy, but not broken either. But people never looked like monsters in pictures. Monsters didn't snarl on cue. Hey, a voice called behind her. Deputy Rourke, mid-50s, weathered, a local. You ever seen anything like this? Lena stood slowly, brushing dirt from her hands. No, she said flatly. Have you? He shook his head. Cars get stolen, sure. Families disappear. No, not like this. It's like they got out to stretch and never came back. Or were never meant to, she muttered. Inside the van. The middle seats were pushed forward to make a makeshift bed in the back. Blankets were tangled, pillows tossed. A child's drawing was wedged between the cushions, stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. One of the heads was shaded in black crayon, scribbled over and over until the paper tore. Lena took out her notepad, but she wasn't writing, just holding something solid. The stillness of it all was pressing in on her like a fog. She'd seen disappearances before, teens running off, parents taking off, with kids in bitter custody fights. But this wasn't a fight. It wasn't a struggle. It was an absence. A vacuum where a family once lived, and, God, that flip-flop that evening. Lena sat at her kitchen table, the case file open beside a cup of cold coffee. The sun had long dipped behind the mountains, leaving her apartment cast in shades of amber and shadow. Photos from the scene stared back at her. The van, the flip-flop, the empty sippy cup, the missing. She had no suspects, no motive, no theory, but there was something about that van. The neatness of it. The way nothing was taken. Not the wallet in the glove box. Not the camera. Not even the snacks. Someone had left that van parked like they expected to return, and didn't. She clicked the recorder on her desk. Case log. Dalton family disappearance. Date. August 12, 1998. Location. Sierra Nevada Scenic Overlook, Donner's Point, family of 4. Van found abandoned. Flip-flop, discovered near cliff. No evidence of foul play at the scene. Search ongoing. Mother may have been last seen at a Shell station off Highway 49. Witness described her as distracted. She paused, and yet, something's wrong. Not just missing, gone. Like someone made them vanish without a trace. I don't believe in ghosts. But this feels like one. She clicked the recorder off. Outside her window, the woods swayed gently under the weight of night. Somewhere out there, 4 names hung in the air like unfinished sentences. She didn't know yet that this case would haunt her for years, that it would take her into places where truth and horror danced too close together. All she knew was the Dalton family left home and never came back. And that was just the beginning. The station's evidence room smelled like bleach and stale carpet, an odd mix of sterilization and decay. Detective Lena Maris stood inside the chain link cage, gloves on, sorting through the contents of a labeled cardboard box. Dalton case, evidence A98, Dr-Van. Inside, family maps, wrappers, a crumpled gas receipt from August 4th, a torn coloring book cover. None of it screamed crime. It screamed ordinary. That was the most unsettling part. She lifted a cracked leather case from beneath a pile of clutter. It was heavier than it looked. A Sony handheld tape recorder, early 90s model. A faded Garfield sticker was barely holding onto the side. It had been ripped. Someone wanted what was on it to be heard or remembered. Lena glanced around. The room was empty. She pulled up a metal stool, clicked the recorder on, and pressed play. Click. Is it working now? Okay, say something, Ben. Hi, Daddy. I'm a dinosaur. Raw. Don't eat the tape, buddy. Laughter. She sat perfectly still, her breath slowed. All right, road trip, day 2, Richard Dalton's voice said. We're about 2 hours outside Reno. Sarah's behind the wheel. Kids are alive and mostly civil. Barely, Sarah muttered, half joking. The tone was light, warm. A family trying to make memories, but Lena had listened to enough interrogation tapes in her career to know how quickly tone could be a mask. Emily, you want to say something? No. A teenage girl's voice. Quiet. Come on, smile for the invisible camera. It's not a camera, Dad. Long silence. Fine. Don't talk. Just don't pout or weak, okay? There it was. The first crack, something sharp beneath the surface. Lena rewound and played the last 30 seconds again. The tension wasn't in the words, but in the spaces between them. The next segment clicked in mid-sentence. ... I said we'd talk about it. Not turn the whole trip into a goddamn intervention. Keep your voice down, Rich. The kids, they need to hear it. We can't keep pretending everything's don't. Do this here, not now, please. Muffled noise, maybe shifting in the seat. Lena's chest tightened. She glanced at the evidence box again, at a snapshot of Richard and Sarah Dalton at a lake, both smiling. Both holding kids that didn't know yet how quickly everything could fall apart. He knows we're out here. Beat, what did you just say? I said he knows. You don't get it. We shouldn't have come this way. Jesus, Sarah, don't start. The audio distorted slightly, like a bump in the road or a shaky hand. Then, nothing. Static. Lena paused the tape. He knows we're out here. She replayed it slower. Louder. The voice was Sarah's, but her tone was different now. Breathless, panicked, like she was trying not to be heard by someone else. Who was he? Lena reached for the case file and flipped to Sarah Dalton's profile. No known enemies, no restraining orders, no criminal background. But an older brother-in-law, Nathaniel Dalton, was briefly mentioned in a note about the family dynamic, estranged. No contact in 5 years. Lena scribbled the name down. That wasn't a coincidence. Turn it off, Rich, please, Sarah, turn it off. Click, the tape went dead. Lena sat back, her spine cold with sweat. The cheerful banter was a smokescreen. This wasn't just a happy family vanishing. It was a family running from something. Or someone. She loaded the tape into a secure digital archive, labeled it for forensic audio, and requested enhancement for the background noises. There had been something faint behind the voices, like wind. No, not wind. A low hum, a generator, or maybe a vehicle idling just off mic. Back in her office, Lena pored over the photos again. The maps in the glove box weren't just scenic, they were marked. Red pen circles, back roads, isolated campgrounds, one-way dirt trails, not tourist spots. Escape routes. She opened a new file, scribbled. Motive, fleeing something, someone known. Tone shift on tape. Midpoint, Sarah frightened, refers to he, possibly Nate. Richard, increasingly aggressive, defensive. Children, mostly silent. Emily distant. Ben oblivious. Her eyes drifted to a quote she'd pinned above her desk years ago. Something her mentor once told her. Listen for what people don't say. That's where the truth is hiding. She listened again. This time with headphones. Not for the words, but for the silence. Ben's chatter disappeared entirely halfway through the tape. Emily didn't speak again. The last laugh was hollow, and Sarah, her voice cracked only once. That's when she said, he knows. Who had she been afraid of? Lena's phone buzzed. CSU had finished dusting the recorder. Only 2 sets of prints. Sarah's and Richard's. Nothing else. It hadn't changed hands. But that meant Sarah wanted the tape in the van. Why? She rewound to the very beginning. A line she hadn't noticed the first time. Is it working now? Okay, if anything happens, just keep recording. The van wasn't just abandoned, it was a message. The morning fog clung low over the sleepy town of Coldwater Ridge, population 3,412. The kind of town where time got stuck in the amber of routine, and everyone still waved at stop signs. It was where Richard Dalton had grown up, where people knew your dog's name and all your sins. Lena parked her unmarked sedan in front of a corner diner with chipped window paint that read Benny's Breakfast and Burgers. She slid into a booth and ordered black coffee before anyone asked her name. Her badge stayed in her coat. She didn't need it yet. This wasn't an interrogation. Not officially. The waitress, a woman with silver curls and a smoker's cough, squinted at her. You're not from around here. Just passing through, Lena said. Looking into something old, the woman leaned on one hip. This about the Daltons. Lena didn't flinch. You knew them. Everyone did. Shame, what happened? Those kids were sweet. Her voice dropped. You'll hear all kinds of things, but if you're smart, you'll stay away from the brother, Nate. A silence, thicker than syrup, filled the booth. The waitress looked down and wiped an already clean counter. We don't talk about Uncle Nate. Lena let the silence hang. It spoke louder than any denial. Later that afternoon, Lena knocked on the door of a modest blue bungalow with a sagging roof and a rosebush that had long given up. A small woman in a cardigan answered. Martha Lindell, age 71, longtime neighbor and church friend of the Daltons. Her eyes welled up before Lena even introduced herself. They were good people, Martha said, ushering her into a living room lined with porcelain angels and crocheted scripture verses. Sarah was bright, always volunteering at the library. Emily had a temper, but a kind heart. Ben had the loudest giggle. It echoed, and Richard, Martha paused. He was quiet. Kept to himself more after Nate came back. Lena leaned in. Tell me about him. Martha's face tightened. Nate was trouble. Always was. Joined the military to avoid jail. Came back worse. Mean eyes. Real mean. The kind of man who could look at a baby and see a threat. Did he live with the family? No, Martha said quickly. He tried. Richard said no, but he still came around. Especially when Sarah was alone. Lena raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? I mean, Martha said, voice lowering. He looked at her like she owed him something. And she looked back. Like maybe once, she did. That landed like a stone in Lena's chest. Was there a specific incident? She asked, but Martha nodded. It was a birthday party. July of 97, Emily's 12th. Half the neighborhood was there. Kids playing in the yard, balloons, cake, all of it. And then Nate shows up, uninvited. What happened? I didn't see it all, but I heard shouting from the side of the house. Later, Richard had a split lip. Sarah's dress was torn at the shoulder. They said it was an accident, but the way she held her arm, it wasn't nothing. Lena scribbled quickly. Did anyone call the police? No one wanted to escalate. That's what we used to say in towns like this. Don't escalate. Just pray and move on, and after that, they stopped hosting things. Didn't come to church. Kids looked pale, withdrawn. Sarah lost weight. Emily started wearing long sleeves in summer. Something had changed, and we all pretended not to notice. Lena's fingers tightened around her pen. Do you know where I can find Nate now? Martha's eyes flitted to the window, as if afraid he might be standing outside. No one's seen him in years. Last we heard, he was squatting up north, some old hunting cabin near Devil's Hollow. Real off-grid stuff. Lena stood. Thank you, Martha. You've been more helpful than you know. As she stepped out onto the porch, Martha called after her. Detective, if you go looking for Nate, be careful. Some men don't stay gone because they're lost. Some stay gone because they like the dark. The sheriff's records confirmed it. Nathaniel Dalton. Born 1954. Dishonorably discharged in 83 for mental instability and violent conduct. Arrested in 89 for battery. Charges dropped. Lived mostly transient. No fixed address. Considered unstable, but never locked up for long. Lena stared at the grainy mugshot on the photocopied page. Mid-40s, sun-leathered skin, deep-set eyes, faint smile that didn't reach them. There was something off in his gaze. Not blank, not angry. Just empty dot. The kind of man who didn't leave fingerprints. Just bruises that faded before anyone asked questions. She added his name to her timeline of the Dalton disappearance. There was something too convenient about the family vanishing without a trace. But the only family member who hated being traced was still alive, unaccounted for. And then there was that voice on the tape. He knows we're out here. It hadn't been paranoia. It had been prophecy. She drove out of Coldwater Ridge just as the sun began to set, washing the hills in copper and blood orange. In her rear view, the town disappeared, but the weight of it, the silence, the secrets, the willful forgetfulness clung to her. Ahead, the road twisted toward Devil's Hollow, where forgotten men wait, where ghosts walk alive, where truth stares out with someone else's eyes. 18 years had passed since the Dalton family vanished. By 2016, the case had long grown cold, buried beneath newer tragedies, fresher headlines, and a town eager to forget. Detective Lena Maris had transferred out years ago, buried herself in other cases, other ghosts. But some silences don't stay buried. Some scream from the sky. J.C. Harlow wasn't thinking about missing persons. When he launched his drone over the forested slope near Donner's Point, the 17-year-old had a history report due and a quadcopter, gifted by a dad who didn't show up much. He figured aerial footage of the old Gold Rush trails would impress his teacher. His drone, a refurbished DJI Phantom II, buzzed to life with a warble and climbed smoothly into the warm afternoon sky. JC maneuvered it over treetops, his iPad screen showing real-time video. Miles of pine, dried riverbeds, nothing out of the ordinary. Then the feed glitched, just a stutter, and the screen snapped to a wide clearing. A square outline. JC leaned in. Nestled between trees was something that didn't belong. A rusted metal structure, partially collapsed, barely visible beneath vines and fallen branches. Not a cabin, not a mine entrance. It looked like a storm shelter, a man-made box, buried in the wild. He tilted the drone lower. As the camera steadied, the breath caught in his chest. Coiled in the barbed wire atop the shelter was a scrap of faded blue cotton, torn, snagged, fluttering weakly. He zoomed in, a cartoon shark, teeth bared. The image was faint, but unmistakable. JC froze. He'd seen that shark before. In a true crime documentary he watched late one night, the same one where they showed a family photo. A little boy named Ben Dalton, wearing that shirt. He pressed record by the next morning. The footage had gone viral. His shaky drone video made local news and then exploded across Reddit, YouTube, and crime forums. The Dalton case, long relegated to cold files and foggy memories, was suddenly alive again. Lena Maris saw the headline while pouring coffee. Her hand stopped mid-pour. The mug overflowed. Dalton case. Drone may have spotted possible crime scene in woods. She didn't breathe as she clicked play. The drone swept in slow arcs over the shelter, revealing the structure's rusted door, overgrown entrance, and that strip of cloth, blue, waving almost like it was trying to be seen. It had been 18 years. She was in her car before the coffee cooled. The forest felt smaller than she remembered. Or maybe she was just older. Lena followed the marked trail, then veered off where crime scene tape now flooded weakly between trees. A small crowd of local law enforcement had assembled. Most were younger than the case file. Sheriff Grady met her at the clearing. "Didn't expect you to come all the way out here," he said. "Thought you'd hung up your ghost-chasing boots." She nodded once. "I never stopped following this one." The shelter was real. 20 feet by 12, its metal roof sunken. In places, covered with pine needles and rot. Lena walked the perimeter slowly. The barbed wire surrounding it was newer than expected. Maybe 10 years old, not part of the original design. Someone had tried to keep people out, or keep someone in. She stopped beneath the spot where the shirt had been tangled. It had already been collected by forensics, bagged and labeled. She knew they wouldn't find DNA. The sun and rain had scrubbed it clean long ago, but the design was enough. The shark. Ben's shark. She descended the concrete steps carefully. Her flashlight beam swept the interior. Dust thick as snowfall. Cracked tiles, mold along the edges, but also markings. Along the back wall, dozens of scratch marks, uneven, and clustered in groups. Days, months. One corner had children's drawings, faint with age, stick figures, trees, a house with smoke curling from a crooked chimney. Lena's breath hitched, and in the opposite corner, darker stains, mattresses, molded blankets, rope fibers on the floor. "This was lived in," she said aloud. The forensics tech nearby nodded. "We found food cans dated from 1999 to 2001. Someone was here a long time." Lena ran her fingers along the markings again. "There were kids here. They grew up here. Or died here," someone muttered behind her. She stepped out of the shelter, blinking into the sun. There were no bodies, not yet. But the shelter whispered of captivity. Of years stolen. Of someone who kept them. Back at the temporary mobile unit, Lena reviewed satellite overlays. The shelter hadn't appeared on any property records. It wasn't listed on forest maps or local registries. It had been deliberately hidden, and whoever built it knew the terrain well. She pulled up her notes from 18 years ago. One circled name stared back at her. Nathaniel Dalton, reclusive, paranoid, ex-military, familiar with survivalist tactics. Last known location, the general region of Devil's Hollow, just 10 miles from the shelter. The walls were closing in. She stared at the satellite image, not just at the shelter, but what surrounded it. A wide clearing, a trench, old tire marks, long since faded. It wasn't just a shelter, it was a compound. Lena leaned over the map, whispering more to herself than anyone else. They weren't just taken, they were kept, systematically, quietly, for years. And now finally, the forest had given up one of its secrets. That night, alone in her motel room, Lena played the drone footage again, paused, zoomed. Near the edge of the frame, barely visible, was something else. A pile of charred wood, metal scraps, a fire pit, the faint outline of a spiral drawn in soot across the concrete beside it. Not a child's drawing. Something ritualistic, intentional. She grabbed her notebook. Storm shelter, long-term occupancy, children's items, barbed wire perimeter, nearby it. Spiral marking. One word echoed over and over in her mind. Why? The tape recorder had given her fear. The town had given her silence. The forest had now given her a location. But the story was still missing its center. Still missing the one person who could answer everything, Emily Dalton. If she was still alive, the air inside the shelter didn't just smell like mildew. It smelled old, stale, sour, haunted, like grief had been sealed in here and left to ferment. Lena descended the concrete stairs slowly, each step echoing in the confined space. Her flashlight beams swept the room, a low square bunker no bigger than a single-car garage. The metal door creaked behind her as it closed. The world above vanished. She wasn't alone. 2 forensic techs knelt by the wall, photographing markings. Sheriff Grady hovered near the entrance, clearly uncomfortable. "It's colder down here than it should be," he muttered. Lena didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the walls, dot carvings, hundreds of them. Each scratch, each line, was deliberate. Grouped in clusters of 5, like tally marks. Weeks, months, or just desperate attempts to stay aware of time. One wall held the most marks, the pattern ending abruptly with a deep, almost violent slash through the last group. Beneath it, in shaky black marker, July 17, 2001. 3 years. That was how long someone lived down here after the van was found. Not days, not weeks, years. Lena felt her stomach tighten. She stepped farther in. To her right, rotting foam pads, once mattresses, now shredded by mold and mice. Children's blankets. Clung to the corners, a faded cartoon princess, a rocket ship. One pillow had a name stitched into it, barely legible. Emily. The drawings were worse. Crayons on concrete, simple, childish images. A sun with uneven rays, 4 stick figures. Too tall, too short. One figure had X's for eyes. Another had its head shaded black, like someone had tried to erase it. One picture had a shelter drawn in brown crayon. A square in a forest, inside it, 3 people. Outside, watching from the trees, a figure with red eyes. Lena crouched to examine it, heart thudding. This was their world, she whispered. A box, a prison, and someone watching. One of the techs called her over. "You're going to want to see this." In the far corner, behind a broken shelf, was a smear on the wall. Dark, dried, almost hidden by dust. Blood. And just beneath it, a handprint, small, maybe adolescent, smeared downward, like whoever left it had been sliding, falling, or trying to hold themselves up. No body, no remains, the text said quietly. But this was a moment. Lena nodded, staring at the print. Her mind tried to reconstruct the scene. Panic, maybe an injury, maybe worse. But the size of the hand, it wasn't adult, it was Emily's, or Ben's. Grady shifted near the door, arms crossed tight. "What the hell happened down here?" Lena answered without turning. "Captivity, isolation, psychological breakdown. Whoever held them here knew what they were doing, and they let them exist just long enough to forget what freedom felt like." She turned back to the wall. Back to the final tally mark, July 2001. But someone lived 3 years past their disappearance. Someone was keeping track. Grady frowned. "You think they escaped after that?" "Maybe," Lena said. "Or maybe that's the day someone stopped counting." The techs had uncovered more items. Half a playing card, a comb, chewed pencil ends. Lena picked up a crumpled piece of notebook. Paper, yellowed and brittle. A single sentence was scrawled over and over. "We'll go outside tomorrow. We'll go outside tomorrow. We'll go outside tomorrow." It repeated 16 times, then stopped. A lie repeated until it turned into a lullaby. Lena stepped back, the weight of it all pressing into her chest. She'd been in crime. Scenes before, shootings, suicides, rooms where rage had painted the walls red. But this was slower, colder, a violence of time, not blood. A place where hope was carved away, one tally at a time. She looked up at the ceiling. Rusted hooks, maybe once for storage, now empty. A single dangling wire, frayed and sparking at the end. No light bulbs, and yet, someone had drawn, written, waited. "Where's the rest?" Lena murmured. The food cans ended in 2001. But no sign of escape. No sign of bodies. The tech looked uneasy. We're expanding the perimeter search. If they died, it wasn't here. Sheriff Grady was already climbing the stairs. He had seen enough. Lena lingered. Something about the silence in the shelter didn't feel like silence. It felt like a question. She kneeled by the bloodied handprint, eye level now, and whispered like she might be heard. "Who were you reaching for?" No answer. Just the creak of metal and the settling groan of old concrete. She stood slowly. One last look at the names she didn't yet have. One last breath of air that hadn't moved in years. Then she climbed back into the light. Outside, teams swept the surrounding forest. Drones overhead. Dogs barking in the distance. A perimeter was being set up for ground-penetrating radar. Lena lit a cigarette, a habit she'd broken years ago. Her hands trembled as she cupped the flame. "What now?" Grady asked, appearing beside her. "We dig, we look for the rest of the story. And we find out who knew about this place." She stared into the trees, her eyes scanning something invisible. Her thoughts drifted back to the audio tape. Sarah's voice, trembling, warning, "He knows we're out here." The shelter didn't just prove captivity, it proved someone had known where to find them, and kept them hidden. For 3 long years, and maybe longer. The match came in on a Monday morning, not from fingerprints or photo recognition, but from DNA scraped from the rusted drain in the shelter's floor. Lena was reviewing old Dalton family footage when the alert buzzed. Through partial familial match, female, approximately 30 years old, residing in a state psychiatric facility in Humboldt County. The woman had been admitted in 2004, no ID, no history, no missing person report. Intake had labeled her Jane S. She hadn't corrected them. Her profile said she was quiet. Withdrawn, showed signs of deep trauma and dissociation. Spoken fragments. Drew spirals. Lena booked the next flight north, Humboldt Hills Psychiatric Center sat against the edge of a pine-drenched cliffside, surrounded by fog and whispers. It was the kind of place society left people when they didn't know what else to do with them, or didn't want to know at all. The staff was polite but cautious when Lena showed her badge. "She doesn't like questions," the nurse warned. "Doesn't always answer with words." Lena followed the nurse down a hallway that smelled like antiseptic and time. Room 207. Inside. The woman sat on the floor, her back to the wall, barefoot and rocking slowly. Her fingers were stained with ink. Spirals covered the walls, drawn in pen, crayon, pencil, even nail scratches where tools had run out. Tight, obsessive loops, each one darker than the last dot. Lena stood in the doorway. She knew immediately. Emily Dalton, but older now, gaunt, pale eyes that had once glared at cameras now stared through them. She looked like someone who had been erased and redrawn over and over until only the outline remained. "Emily," Lena said softly, no reaction. The woman continued drawing. Lena stepped inside and sat near the wall, just far enough not to startle. My name is Lena Maris. I was the first detective on your case." The woman's hand paused for half a second, then kept drawing. "I found the shelter," Lena continued. "We found what was left. We're trying to piece it together." No answer. "You're not forgotten," Lena said. "We didn't stop looking." The spiral deepened, darker now. The woman's voice emerged flat, hoarse. "He never stopped watching." Lena froze. "Who?" "The one with the eyes in the trees. The red ones. He said, if we ever left, he'd come back." The sentence hung in the air like breath in cold air. Lena felt it tighten around her ribs. "Was it your uncle, Nathaniel?" Emily didn't answer. She set the crayon down and picked up a pencil instead, immediately starting another spiral. "He made us play a game," she whispered. "We weren't allowed to say our names. We weren't allowed to count days out loud. If we did, he made us start over." "Start what, over?" Lena asked. "Time." Emily stood up suddenly, as if remembering something she'd forgotten how to forget. "Ben got it wrong once. He asked for a toy, and Nate," she didn't finish. Lena stood too. "Emily, Is Ben still alive? Emily turned away. He's small now, smaller than he was. He stopped talking before I did. Tears stung Lena's eyes. Do you remember the last day? July 2001? Emily flinched hard. She turned and pointed toward the ceiling, finger trembling. That's when the trapdoor opened. What trapdoor? Above the shelter, where the shadows came in. He said, we could go free if we passed the test. Lena's voice was soft. What test? Emily's face crumpled like paper. If we could choose, if we knew who deserved to stay. Lena was about to speak again when Emily pressed her hands over her ears and whispered, he made us choose. Emily, he made me choose. Lena backed off, her throat tight. She sat down again. Let the silence settle. Waited. Minutes passed. Then Emily crossed the room slowly, slid something into Lena's hand. A folded piece of paper, creased and worn. A child's drawing. 2 stick figures. One tall, one short. One labeled me, the other Ben. Beside them, a larger figure, the head blacked out. A speech bubble next to him said, only one of you leaves. Lena couldn't speak. Emily sat down again and began another spiral. Later, in the nurse's station, Lena requested a copy of Emily's intake report. It confirmed what she feared. She'd been found in 2004, wandering near a highway in tattered clothes, malnourished, nonverbal, taken in as a Jane Doe. A psychiatric hold turned into permanent placement. No one had cross-checked her DNA. No one had matched her to the Dalton file. For 12 years she'd been found, and then forgotten again. Lena stared at the report, rage swirling in her gut. How many others had slipped through like this? She made a copy of Emily's blood work and requested a scan for long-term medications. If Emily was heavily sedated or, this time, her testimony could be incomplete or intentionally suppressed. Outside the facility, fog coiled through the pines. Lena called in to her task force. We've got a living witness, she said. She's not well, but she's talking. You think she knows what happened? The deputy asked. She survived it. She knows everything, but we have to find a way to bring her memory out without destroying what's left of her. She mentioned Nate. Lena paused. She mentioned someone who made her choose. There was a long silence on the other end. Then, and Ben, I don't know yet. She hung up back in her motel room. She pinned the drawing to the wall. The 3 figures. The choice, and the truth that had been buried with those tally marks on the shelter wall. Emily hadn't just survived captivity. She'd survived being made into an accomplice. Emily wouldn't say the word shelter. She called it the box, always in a whisper, always with her eyes on the floor. Each time Lena visited the hospital, she brought something with her. A childhood book, a photograph, a voice recorder, placed gently on the table. Emily didn't touch them, but her eyes lingered longer each time. It took weeks before Emily began to talk in full sentences. What came wasn't linear, not a timeline, but puzzle pieces dropped into a fog. It started as a game, she said. One afternoon, he made us pretend we were on a mission, like the army, like Dad used to say. Lena's pen paused. Your dad came up with the game. Emily shook her head. Nate made the rules. But Dad didn't stop him. Flashback, -1998, interior, dim shelter, flickering lantern light. A young Emily, 12, kneels on a foam pad. Ben is curled up nearby, clutching a stuffed animal missing one eye. Richard Dalton stands near the door, silent, arms crossed. Nate's voice, low and steady. The rules keep us alive. Speak when you're told. Eat what's given. Smile when I say. And if anyone lies, a pause. The sound of rope tightening. You all start over. Sarah flinches. Richard doesn't move. He called it starting over, Emily explained, tracing a spiral on her hospital blanket. That meant no food, no talking. For days, he made us erase everything. Drawings, names, calendars. Said we didn't earn time. Lena listened carefully. How often did it happen? Emily shrugged. Whenever someone got too loud, or asked about leaving, she turned and stared at the wall, the spirals now smudged from earlier rains. 1 day Ben asked why we couldn't go to school anymore, and Dad slapped him. Lena blinked. Your dad, he said, we needed to adapt. That this was the world now, that Nate had warned him. What did he warn him about? Emily whispered. That someone was always watching. That the world wasn't safe. That if we left, they'd take us. Who's they? Lena asked gently. Emily's expression went blank. The shadows. Flashback late 1999 inside the box. Everyone seated, cross-legged. Sarah's face is thinner now, bruised. Emily is quiet, older. Richard reads from a torn survivalist manual aloud while Nate scribbles on a war map. Nate, this isn't punishment. This is freedom. No government, no corruption, no lies. Richard nods, eyes glazed. Ben plays with a rock, like it's a toy. Sarah stares at the ceiling. Back in the present, Emily drew 2 stick figures, one labeled N, the other, Dad. She drew a line connecting them. Dad didn't try to escape, she said. Not once. He agreed with Nate. Said Mum was soft. Lena's breath caught. What happened to her? Emily went quiet. Her eyes glassed over. She tried to run, she said finally. The trapdoor was open for air one day. She pushed Ben up first, told me to follow, but Nate. Tears welled. Dad helped him drag her back, said she'd ruined everything. Said she was going to get us all killed. Lena felt her stomach twist. After that, she got sick, Emily whispered. And one night, she was just gone. Gone where? Emily didn't answer. But Lena already knew. She returned to the shelter the next day. Something gnawed at her, something she'd missed. She walked past the main bunker room, past the drain and tally wall, near the rear, behind stacked debris. She found it. A second trapdoor, smaller, padlocked, rusted over, camouflaged beneath broken tiles. Forensics was called in. Inside, bones. A woman's, wrapped in a shredded blanket. Jaw fractured. Ribcage bruised. Sarah Dalton never left the box. That night, Lena played back her voice notes. Emily's whispers echoed. Dad wasn't a prisoner, he chose to stay. It wasn't just Nate's twisted game. It had metastasized into something worse, something shared. A cult of 2, a belief system forged in isolation. Father and brother, convinced the world outside was the enemy and the family. Just collateral. The next time Lena saw Emily, she brought no questions. Only a single truth. They found your mother. Emily's shoulders stiffened. She nodded once. That was all. She never stopped trying, Lena said. I know Emily. Said she's why I left. Lena frowned. How did you escape? Emily didn't respond. Instead, she drew 2 spirals, one smaller than the other, and set her crayon down. Then, quietly, there's something you still haven't found. It started with a shoebox dot, found buried beneath floorboards in the Dalton family's old garage. The house had been sold 3 times since 1998. But time, as always, had a habit of leaving shadows behind. The box was water damaged, duct taped, shut, and wrapped in plastic. Inside letters, dozens, all handwritten, all signed with a single initial N. Lena sat on her motel bed, gloves on, sorting through them like they were artifacts from a collapsed civilization. The handwriting was erratic, sometimes neat, sometimes frenzied. Sometimes hearts dotted the I's, sometimes they were crossed out so hard the paper tore. Each envelope was addressed to Sarah. The first letter was dated March 1990. You told me it was over, but we both know better. I knew you before he did. You kissed me before the wedding. You were mine before you were ever his. Lena exhaled slowly. So it was true. Nate and Sarah had a history, not just rumors, not just gossip from nervous neighbors. This was evidence. The letters tracked a volatile pattern. Love, rage, obsession. Pleas to leave Richard. Threats to disappear. Apologies written over the same page 5 different times. I see the way you look at me, even now. He's not strong enough for you. You're wasting your life. You could have run with me, but then the tone shifted. You think you can ruin me? After what you did that night? That line stopped Lena cold. She flipped to the next letter. This one was shorter. No pleasantries, no pet names, just raw venom. You were drunk, you hit the kid, you left the scene. The only one who helped you clean it up. You want to talk about monsters? Look in the mirror. Lena's pulse thudded in her throat. Sarah had a secret, and Nate had buried it, only to dig it back up when she tried to leave him behind. The accident had never been reported. No fatality from that time matched Sarah's name. Lena dug through old traffic reports from nearby counties. Eventually, she found it. August 1989, a teenage cyclist struck and killed near Nevada City. Driver fled the scene. Witnesses claimed it was a dark sedan. No arrest made. Sarah Dalton had driven a black Oldsmobile. Lena rubbed her temples. The guilt must have eaten Sarah alive, and Nate had fed on it. Used it. Weaponized it. The affair wasn't just about lust, it was about control. And when she tried to break free, to return to her family, Nate reminded her that she wasn't innocent either. You run to your husband, but I'm still under your skin. I kept your secret. That makes you mine. Lena's hands trembled. The picture was shifting again. Sarah wasn't just a victim, she was a prisoner of her own past, a woman held hostage by the worst version of herself, aversion. Nate wouldn't let her forget. No wonder she stayed quiet. No wonder she never ran far. No wonder she got sick, and never recovered. She'd been rotting from the inside, long before the shelter. Later that evening, Lena sat across from Emily at the hospital. She slid one of the letters across the table. Emily didn't touch it, but her eyes read every word. After a long silence, she said, "Mum used to scream in her sleep. She'd say, 'I didn't mean to,' over and over." You think she meant the accident? Emily nodded. She told me once that loving someone isn't always clean. That sometimes it stains. Lena leaned forward. Did you know about her and Nate? I figured it out. Eventually, he always treated her like she belonged to him, and she never said no loud enough. She tried, Lena said. I know, Emily whispered, but she tried too late. Back in her motel, Lena pinned the letters on the wall beside Emily's drawings. The web was no longer linear. It wasn't just crime gives investigation, gives justice. It was twisted, messy, every thread wrapped around someone who should have spoken sooner, fought harder, chosen differently. Nate wasn't just a kidnapper, he was a consequence, a shadow summoned by secrets no one wanted to name. And Sarah, she was both victim and catalyst. A woman chained by guilt. A mother who'd tried to protect her children while buried under her own shame. Lena stared at the final letter. The one with tear stains. Written in Sarah's unmistakable hand. I can't undo what I did, but I can keep them safe, even if it costs me everything. The next day, she had vanished with her family. And Nate had followed. Or led. Lena wasn't sure anymore. But she knew one thing. There was still one player left. Richard Dalton. The man who had stayed silent. The man who, according to Emily, never tried to leave. They said, trauma protects you. That the brain folds itself around unbearable memory, like paper around flame, keeping the burn contained. But some memories don't stay buried. They bleed at the edges. Emily sat across from Lena again. She hadn't spoken in days. Just drawn. The same 3 spirals, one inside the other, tighter each time. Then, without warning, she whispered. He coughed for 3 days. Then he stopped making noise. Lena froze. Emily nodded. Tell me about that night. Emily stared down at her hands. It was hot, stifling. We'd run out of canned fruit. Nate said fruit was a luxury. Said Ben was just weak. That survival meant sacrifice. She picked at the edge of her sleeve. He kept saying, we're cleansing ourselves. Stripping away what's soft, but Ben wasn't soft. He was just 6. Her voice cracked. Lena reached out but didn't touch. She'd learned not to push. Mum begged Nate to take Ben to a doctor. Emily continued. She even offered herself. Said, take me outside, I'll get help. Just let me go. Nate refused. Emily's laugh was brittle. He laughed in her face, said he'd already let her go the day she chose Richard over him. She went quiet for a long time. Then, Ben died that night. His body went cold while I was holding him. I didn't say anything. I didn't want Nate to know. Why? Emily's eyes met hers, hollow, furious, because he'd use it, twist it, make it a lesson. See what happens when you question me. Flashback, night of July 17, 2001, inside the shelter. A lantern flickers. Ben's small body is curled beneath a blanket. Sarah rocks silently, whispering a prayer to no one. Emily watches from the corner, silent tears streaking her cheeks. Nate paces. Richard sits still, arms across his knees, eyes sunken. Nate, this isn't on me. This is the world's fault. This is her fault. She weakened him. Sarah snaps. She lunges at Nate, nails clawing, voice shaking. You killed him. A flash of silver. A struggle. Then, Richard moves fast, animalistic, crashing into Nate, sending them both against the wall. A knife clatters across the floor. Emily screams. Everything is chaos. Someone grabs the blade. Someone doesn't get up. Emily clutched her head now. Rocking slightly. I don't remember who stabbed whom, she whispered. I just remember the blood. It smelled like rust. It got in my mouth. Lena leaned in gently. But you saw someone drag bodies. Emily nodded. It was Dad, I think. But it could have been Nate, or maybe both were still alive. I heard groaning. Then it stopped. Where did they go? Emily pointed to the side of the room. The trees. Past the clearing. Where the spiral was drawn in ash. Lena wrote that down. Same place shown in the drone footage. Then what happened? Emily blinked, trying to summon the next image. I waited for hours, maybe days. Mum stopped eating. She wouldn't move. She kept holding Ben, even when he started to smell. Her voice broke on that word, smell. I think she starved herself on purpose, she whispered. Or she just gave up. Her mind went before her body did. Lena's pen slowed. Emily pulled something from her pocket. A folded piece of paper, creased so many times it was nearly torn through. She opened it. It was another drawing. A girl, small, barefoot, standing alone at a crossroads. Behind her, a square box. Ahead of her, trees. On either side, shadows with long fingers and no faces. I left when it rained, Emily said. I remember that. I climbed up through the trapdoor. I didn't look back. Did you know who you were? No? Emily wiped her face. I knew I was wrong. That I was alive and they weren't. That maybe I'd helped somehow. Maybe by not fighting harder. Maybe by choosing to survive. Lena's voice cracked. You were a child, but I still chose. That night, Lena returned to the shelter, alone. She stepped beyond the rope line, walked past the bunker door, through the clearing where the blood had dried to dust. The fire pit was still there. She knelt by it, brushing aside years of leaves and rot. Beneath the soil was a circle drawn in charred lines, a spiral. The same spiral Emily had drawn for years. Not just a symbol of madness. A map. Lena followed the spiral's curve outward. Walking slowly, tracing it with her boots. 20 feet. 30 then. She saw it, a patch of disturbed earth, subtle but unnatural. She radioed in the team. By morning, they had uncovered 2 skeletons. One male, one female. Both buried in shallow graves, twisted against each other as if frozen in combat. One had a shattered rib cage, the other, a blade still lodged between 2 vertebrae. Lena stood above the bodies as the sun rose. Father and uncle, both dead. Left behind by the girl who had no choice but to survive. Back at the hospital, Lena told Emily gently, We found them. Emily nodded. Didn't ask which one was on top. Didn't need to. They didn't matter. She said, Why not? Emily looked at her. Steady now, because I'm still here. That's what matters. Lena reached out this time, and Emily didn't flinch. Thank you, Lena said. For remembering. Emily smiled faintly. I didn't remember, she said. I relived it. Outside, the sky turned grey. Only one mystery remained, now, a final spiral yet to be followed. The dogs found them before the shovels did. They barked wildly in the morning fog, tails stiff, claws tearing into a patch of soil a few yards beyond. The spiral fire pit Lena had uncovered days earlier. It took less than 2 hours for the team to confirm what Lena already suspected. 2 male skeletons, buried side by side. Shallow graves, barely 2 feet deep. No markers. No mercy. The bones were curled inward. Post-mortem positioning suggesting they'd been dropped or dragged, not placed. DNA testing confirmed it that evening. Nathaniel Dalton. Richard Mark Dalton. Brothers in life, rivals in madness, companions in death. Lena stood over the graves as forensics zipped the remains into body bags. The mountain air was crisp, silent. Even the birds seemed hesitant to sing. 2 decades of silence ended with a whisper, not a scream. The father who stayed, the uncle who hunted, both reduced to bone and dust. Rotting quietly beneath a carpet of pine needles and lies, one knife. Still lodged in Nate's spine, one shattered sternum, Richard's final breath, likely crushed from within. But it wasn't the bodies that stopped Lena cold. It was the scorched pit near them. She found it while circling the perimeter. It's charred. Remains half buried beneath the underbrush. A burn site, long cooled. Logs collapsed inward. Ashes scattered. The shape was unmistakable. A spiral. Inside the pit, they found melted metal, blackened paper fibers, and something small, delicate, miraculously unbroken, a locket. Gold plated, hinged. Inside, a faded photo of 2 children, Emily and Ben, smiling, unaware. Lena sat down on the cold ground, holding it in her gloved hands. The fire had destroyed nearly everything else, but the locket had endured. And beside it, lodged between stones, stuck in hardened ash, a scrap of half-burnt paper, the faint outline of a spiral. Drawn in Sarah Dalton's handwriting. The same kind that once captioned birthday cards, grocery lists, apology notes Emily remembered through tears now. It whispered from the grave. Or maybe not a grave. Because they never found her. They combed the area for weeks. Drones, cadaver dogs, heat-sensing scans, interviews with every person who ever passed through the trail system. Nothing. No confirmed body. No blood. No trace of Sarah Dalton beyond the blanket-trapped skeleton in the shelter. Long presumed to be hers. But DNA proved otherwise. That woman hadn't been Sarah, she'd been someone else, possibly a drifter, possibly another victim. Her identity lost in the shelter's horror. So where was Sarah? Back at the hospital, Lena broke the news to Emily gently. It wasn't her, she said. The body in the shelter, it wasn't your mother. Emily's hands shook. She gripped the edge of the blanket like a child again. Then where did she'll go? We don't know. Emily stared past her, eyes unfocused. She told me once, she whispered, that if everything burned, maybe she could start over. That if she walked far enough, she'd forget her name. Lena nodded. She left the spiral. The locket, I think it was her goodbye, or her warning, Emily said. She used to say spirals weren't symbols of madness. They were doors. Doors to what? To the next version of yourself. Later, alone in her car, Lena reviewed every photograph, the fire pit, the locket, the bodies. The drawing. Everything told the story, and yet everything raised another question. What if Sarah survived? What if she escaped the box, burned the past, and buried the men who'd tried to break her? What if she'd become someone else, somewhere in a town with no memory of Dalton or Nate, or secrets or spirals. Living. Free. Gone. 6 weeks later. Lena received a package at her office. No return address, just her name. Inside, a single postcard, no stamp, no message, just a hand-drawn Spyro, and beneath it, written in delicate cursive. We go outside tomorrow. Lena stared at it for a long time. She could have sent it to forensics, dusted it for prints, analyzed the ink, called in another search, but she didn't. T. Instead. Right beside the photo of the Dalton children. The only survivors of that summer. One confirmed, one lost, and maybe one still watching. The sun filtered weakly through the window of room 207. It was the first warm day in weeks. But Emily hadn't asked to go outside. She didn't speak much anymore. Not after the postcard. Not after they told her mother's body was never found. But Lena still came. She brought coffee, sketch paper, no badge, no questions, just presence. Sometimes, healing starts with someone staying, not asking you to talk, but giving you the space to choose when. That day, Emily chose. She slid a folded paper across the table. Lena opened it slowly, heart already pounding. It was a drawing, childlike, but deliberate, colored with crayon, a forest familiar. The trees crowded, crooked like reaching arms. A sheltered door in the background, open, black inside. The outline of a van parked far off on a ridge. And in the foreground, a woman walking away alone. One hand carried a bag, the other raised in a wave. Lena looked up. Emily was staring straight at her. I saw her leave, she said softly. You told me you didn't remember. Emily nodded once. She told me to forget. Silence pulsed between them. And so, she said, I did. It was after the fires. After the fight. After Ben's last breath and her father's betrayal. She remembered the smell of charred hair. The weight of silence once screaming had emptied the air. Emily sat near the shelter's rear wall, drawing a spiral in soot. Her mother crouched beside her, eyes hollow. Clothes torn, lips cracked. She didn't speak much by then. Her voice had dried up, but that morning she did. She pulled Emily close and whispered something into her hair. You're the clean page. I'm the stain. Emily tried to hold her. Begged her not to go. Sarah only smiled. A soft, broken thing. Forget me. Remember peace. And then she climbed the ladder. Emily waited. An hour passed. Two. She never came back. Back in the present. Lena unfolded another drawing. It was a spiral again. But this one wasn't dark. It started at the center, with a dot labeled me, then lines. Curling outward, then the Vanthifier. The Sky-Age step-out was smaller, thinner, as if the spiral were fading, as it moved further from the center. Lena blinked hard. These drawings, she said. They're your statement. Emily nodded. Words lie easier. Lena asked gently, why did she tell you to forget? Emily stared at the wall, because she wanted someone to survive without guilt. But you did remember. Emily exhaled through her nose. Not always, not everything. It came in pieces. Dreams, triggers, smells. Why tell me now? Emily smiled barely, because someone finally listened without needing a villain. Lena closed the folder. No tape recorder, no lawyers, just crayon sketches that carried more weight than any sworn deposition. Back at her motel, she stared at them again. Sarah hadn't vanished like a victim. She'd disappeared like a ghost, intentional, deliberate, erasing herself so her daughter could live. That wasn't abandonment. That was love, twisted into something unrecognizable by trauma. The next morning, Lena returned to the shelter site. The fire pit was undisturbed. The spiral still carved faintly in the ash. She walked beyond it, toward the trail that faded into the trees. She imagined Sarah walking this path in silence, with the weight of two bodies behind her and one fragile future in her arms. She'd chosen the woods, the unknown, not because she believed she'd survive, but because she believed Emily would. That was her confession. Not in court, not in writing, but in sacrifice at the hospital. Emily was packing, not her belongings, just drawings, hundreds of them. Spirals, trees, faces, mouths stitched shut, hands reaching from the dirt. A visual diary of things she couldn't bring herself to say. Her therapist had approved monitored outpatient care. A private recovery home. Far from the mountains, closer to the sea. You're nervous? Lena asked. Emily shrugged. I don't know how to be anything else. They stood in silence. Then Emily handed Lena a final page. One spiral, but this time, it didn't end in darkness. It ended in light. A small labeled, Start Over. Lena swallowed hard. Do you want us to keep looking for her? Emily shook her head. She already gave me everything. As Lena walked out into the morning light, a gust of wind scattered pine needles across her windshield. She looked back at the hospital. A girl inside, once lost in spirals, had chosen to uncoil, not by clearing her past, but by drawing her way out of it, a confession, not to convict, but to let go. Lena closed the case file with a quiet click. The sound felt louder than it should have. Final, hollow. 12 years of dust had been wiped clean from the Dalton disappearance. 12 chapters of pain, fear, silence, and survival. Pieced together, photograph by photograph, drawing by drawing, bone by bone. But there was no applause, no courtroom speech, just the buzz of the overhead light and the ache behind Lena's ribs. She looked down at the manila folder one last time. Dalton CASE closed, but it didn't feel closed. It felt like a room with no windows. 3 days later, Emily vanished. Not violently, not mysteriously, just gone. Her bed was neatly made. Her art folder was gone. No forced entry, no goodbye note. Security footage showed her stepping out of the hospital's front door at 3:12 a.m., alone, wearing white shoes in hand. A nurse said she'd smiled on the way out. Said she looked lighter, like someone walking towards something, not running from it. The file was updated. Status, voluntary disappearance. Lena didn't argue. Some survivors didn't want rescue. Some just wanted distance. 2 weeks after Emily's disappearance, Lena returned. To the forest, she stood at the edge of the old shelter, now welded shut. Reinforced, a cold metal scar beneath the trees. A padlock sealed the trapdoor. A sign had been installed. Nitrogen, entry federal property. Area closed indefinitely. No one would go back inside. No one would tally new days on those cracked concrete walls, but the forest still whispered. Every wind through the trees still sounded like breath held too long. A year passed, then another. On the 3rd anniversary, Lena received a phone call. Ma'am, we think you should see this. The voice belonged to JC Harlow, the same teen who'd once flown a drone for a school project, and accidentally cracked open a mystery buried in Pine Dot, now a college student. Still flying, he emailed Lena a clip. Drone footage. 6:03 a.m., clear skies. The drone hovered over the old shelter clearing, just as it had in 2016. And then, a release mechanism opened mid-air. A single red rose drifted down. It landed softly on the shelter roof. Perfect, unbruised. No one approached. No one retrieved it. It stayed there, alone, until the rain turned it to pulp. The next year, it happened again, another rose. Then again, every July, a ritual, silent, unclaimed, no signature, no camera crew, no glory. Just a whisper from someone who remembered Lena, never tried to track it. Some truths weren't meant to be followed. At her desk, Lena began writing the final report. It wasn't a legal document. It wasn't even official, just truth. Her truth. There were no heroes in the Dalton case, only survivors, some who lived, some who didn't. Single quotes. The facts tell one story, the trauma tells another. She paused, then continued. There is a kind of justice that doesn't end in punishment, only understanding. She signed her name, folded the paper, placed it inside the file, then quietly slid it into a drawer marked closed but unresolved. Outside, the sky dimmed. A summer storm approached. The same kind that had once soaked the girl who escaped the box. Thunder rolled gently across the Sierra skyline. Lena stood by the window and watched the clouds arrive. In the distance, a hawk glided low, tracing spirals in the wind. She didn't cry, she didn't smile, she just stood, still holding the weight of truth, not on her shoulders, in her gut, where truth really lives. Where it hurts, where it makes sense, even when it doesn't. Themes. Revisited throughout the Dalton case, these themes emerged, not through verdicts, but through silence, scars, and the unspeakable betrayal in relationship. Sarah's love with Nate. Richard's silent complicity, a family fractured by trust long before the shelter. forbidden love and secrets hidden affairs. A fatal accident. Choices that clung like smoke. Emotional manipulation Nate's game. Richard's passivity. The twisting of love into chains. Psychological breakdowns Millie's amnesia. Sarah's dissociation. Guilt that unraveled minds in slow motion. Justice versus truth. No court, no trial. Just bones and drawings and the decision to survive. Power dynamics and personal trauma. Power wasn't just violence, it was silence. It was who got to speak and who had to draw instead. That night, Lena dreamed of the shelter, but it wasn't dark. The spiral wasn't carved in blood, but in chalk. Emily was standing at the center, drawing a new line. And for the first time, it didn't curl inward, it reached out.